Professor Philip Jennings for the City of Cockburn and the Cockburn Wetlands Centre. My name is Nandi Chinna, and I would like to thank you for being interviewed today.
You're welcome.
Before we commence the interview, can you confirm you have read the informed consent and agree to the interview conditions?
Yes, I have done that.
So I'm going to give a little introduction to who you are. So, Honorary Emeritus Professor at Murdoch University, Professor Philip Jennings was involved in early bush generation around North Lake. He led an early campaign to prevent the construction of Farrington Road, which cut through the North Lake Reserve. He's one of the founders of the establishment of the Cockburn Wetlands Centre, founder and long-time chair of the Wetlands Conservation Society of Western Australia, which has had a significant impact on wetland policy in Western Australia. Philip Jennings remains a holder of knowledge and an all-round hero of wetland conservation in Western Australia. So, welcome, Phil. Can we begin by you giving your full name, date of birth, and where you were born?
Yes, my name is Philip Jennings. I was born on the 21st of September in 1941 in Perth, and have lived in WA for most of my life.
And can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up, and a little bit about yourself and some of the influences on you as a child?
Yes, I grew up in a suburb that's now called Floreat. It was in those days on the outskirts of Perth, and we had bush all around us and some lovely wetlands that were almost in pristine condition today. They're known as Perry Lakes, and they're not in pristine condition, but in those days they were surrounded by bushland full of birds, and the bush around us seemed to be endless backseal woodland. I lived all my early years in Floreat, and went to school at Jollymont Primary School and Floreat Park Primary School, Perth Modern School, and the University of Western Australia.
Wow, so you're a true local.
One of the few, that's right, yeah.
And do you think growing up in that environment of Perry Lakes, when it was in a more natural form, influenced you in your life as a scientist and conservationist?
Yes, certainly did. I mean, these days, kids spend a lot of their time looking at screens or, going to organised entertainment. For us, there was none of that in those days. What we used to do on the weekends was wander around in the bushland and look at the birds and the flowers, and explore the old lime kilns, the old quarry, which in those days was just a derelict quarry. It's now the Quarry Amphitheatre out at Raybold Hill, and that was all very exciting, and I guess I developed my love of the WA bushland and the bird life and the wetlands at that stage. I went overseas after I did my first degree and spent 12 years away. When I came back to WA, I was shocked at what had happened, how much the city had sprawled and how little of the backseal woodland was left, and how Perry Lakes had been beautified and turned into ornamental ponds. And, I thought, well, I'd better do something about it before we lose all of that precious biological heritage.
And where did you go for those years you were overseas?
I spent 4 years in Boston at Harvard University, and then 2 years in New Jersey at Bell Labs, and then I got a job back in Australia in Adelaide. I spent 2 years in Adelaide and 4 years in Sydney before I came back to WA. So I saw a bit of the world, and I saw what had happened to some of those other cities, and I was in the United States at a very exciting time when the environmental movement was just starting, and President Kennedy had just started the Peace Corps, and the movement to try to protect the wilderness in the United States was underway. Rachel Carson had just written Silent Spring. A lot of interesting things were going on. So when I came back here, the Australian Conservation Foundation had just started, and I joined that, and got involved with eventually also with the Conservation Council.
Right. And were you working as a research scientist when you were away?
Well, I did a PhD at Harvard, and then I worked as a postdoc at Bell Labs, and I had a Queen Elizabeth Fellowship as another postdoc at Flinders University in South Australia for a couple of years. Then I had a academic appointment as a lecturer and senior lecturer in physics at the University of New South Wales before I came back to WA when Murdoch started in 1975.
Right. And you said you were shocked at the change on the Swan Coastal Plain. Can you describe what you saw?
Yes, well, I saw that so much of the bushland and the wetlands that I had enjoyed as a child had disappeared. I mean, particularly the area where Bold Park is and Wembley Downs, that was all bushland in those days. And I mean, because they had the Commonwealth Games in Perth in 1962, which was the time I left, they had cleared a lot of that and turned it into there was a big stadium built in Bold Park underneath Raybold Hill, and most of Wembley Downs had been converted into a village for the Commonwealth Games. So it was that surprised me, but also lots of other areas south of Perth, also particularly around where Murdoch was being built, had also become heavily urbanised. The Housing Commission had moved into areas like Coolbellup and Hilton and Willagee, and those which had been bushland when I left Perth were now heavily urbanised.
Mm. So this galvanised you to join the conservation movement. And how did that exist in Perth at the time?
Well, the Conservation Council had been started in 1967 by a number of voluntary groups that had been going for years, like the Naturalist Society and the Tree Society, the Rottnest Society. They decided they needed to have an advocacy voice, and they founded the Conservation Council. So they became active, and I ended up getting involved with them in the 70s, and particularly after the Farrington Road dispute in the 1980s.
And you were a key organiser of the Farrington Road protest, weren't you?
Yes, well, we became aware of Farrington Road and the attempt by Main Roads to put a road through the land attempt by the Main Roads to put a road through the bushland at North Lake, which was in those days in almost pristine condition. We made submissions to the EPA during the. Sorry, that raven has been.
You better pause it.
I might just let to disappear. it'll disappear if I walk out there.
So where were we? You were talking about what occurred happening in North
about Farrington Road. Yes, yeah. We became aware of the plans by Main Roads in the city of Cockburn to put a road through the North Lake wetlands in the late 70s, and made submissions to the EPA against it as part of the System 6 process. When the System 6 report came out, the EPA actually recommended the road shouldn't go ahead. However, Main Roads considered itself to be above the EPA, and they just ignored that and went off to Canberra, sought funding for the Farrington Road as a bicentennial road project, and told Canberra authorities that there were no environmental issues involved. In those days there was no federal EPA, and the state EPA didn't know that they'd done. So
you were talking about Main Roads bypassing the West Australian EPA?
Yes, they once they obtained the funding from Canberra, they went to the EPA and said, this is our proposal. The EPA said, well, we are recommending against it. And they said, well, we have this funding, we'll lose the funding if you don't approve it. So the chair of the EPA at that time agreed to change their recommendation, and we didn't know about that until one day. It was the 10th of September 1984. These bulldozers turned up on the shores of North Lake and started clearing the vegetation, and the local community, Cardinia residents, were astonished and amazed because we thought that the EPA had recommended against it. So the students quickly got involved as well, and some of them stood in front of the bulldozers and climbed on the bulldozers, and then the police arrived, and it became quite a I think about 20 students were arrested for disrupting the works that had been approved by the minister, and it became quite a major environmental dispute. In the end, the road went through, although it didn't end up being a dual carriageway as Main Roads had originally wanted, and certain restrictions were put on it, like there was no street lighting so that it wouldn't disturb the nocturnal animals. However, it didn't result in a huge change. The government at the time commissioned a report into other road projects that might affect wetlands, and they received the report, but it was largely ignored by Main Roads. So, I mean, one of the things they looked at was the Roe Highway program, which the EPA had also recommended against, and the Main Roads just waited until the government changed. They had a government that was supportive of Roe Highway. They went back and got the EPA to change their position, and went ahead with it. And well, we know the rest of the story there.
Mm. Yes. So, in your opinion, well, it sounds like from what you're saying that Main Roads seem to be operating as an independent unit rather than part of a whole.
Yes, Main Roads was within the political hierarchy in WA. They report to the Transport Minister. We're the only state in Australia which has a Main Roads department that is independent. In other states, they're all part of the Transport Department, but the Transport Ministry is much higher in the pecking order in Cabinet than the Environment portfolio, and Main Roads regarded the environmental portfolio as, okay, it's interesting that they don't like it, but that's not going to stop us. And they regarded themselves really as being the true urban planners, that, they laid out the road system and then the planning followed. And they regarded themselves, therefore, as being, one of the most senior ministries in cabinet, and yes, they got away with it most times.
Wow. So this area where the Wetlands Centre is situated and where all this Farrington Road protest happened, had you moved into that area by then?
We decided after Farrington Road that it was no good relying on the EPA or relying on government reports or policies, that they really meant nothing when it came down to the real decision making, and that powerful forces were wanting Roe Highway and wanting Farrington Road to go through, and that despite the fact that there were policies we'd worked hard to get in place, they weren't going to stop it. What we had to do was to educate the public about the importance of the wetlands, about the unique biodiversity that exists here, and make people aware that there was something precious that they had to protect, and that protection required vigilance and required large numbers of people being prepared to express their views. So we decided the best thing that we could be doing was to make people aware of what we had and what we were losing, and what we needed to do to protect it. And we thought, why not set up a education centre? The one had been set up at Herdsman just before that, and so we thought, that's the sort of thing we need here. So we approached our old enemy, which was the city of Cockburn, which had been with main roads on building Farrington Road, and they were surprisingly quite receptive to the idea of setting up a wetlands education centre at Bibra Lake, where they were the managers of the Bibra Lake property, and the scouts who were operating there also were happy to be involved, and so we put forward a proposal to obtain funding from the Commonwealth under a special Commonwealth employment program that was being run prior to the 1993 election, because the Keating government recognised that it was going to be a tough election to win, and the unemployment was a big issue, and at the time a lot of people were having a hard time, so they were looking for projects, infrastructure projects that could employ people, and so we put it up for that program. Cockburn ended up getting 6 projects. I think we were about number 9 on the list, so we got a message saying we'd missed out, and we thought, oh, that's too bad. But then I think the government miraculously found some more money and said, we're funding up to number 12. So we got the nod.
Wow.
That would have been in 1991, I guess. So we worked with the city of Cockburn on the design of the building, and work started early in 1992, and in the 92-93 financial year the building was constructed, and that was all a result of that windfall funding that they had. And we had no funding for staff, and it was just an empty building. We didn't have any funding for landscaping, but the City of Cockburn's community outreach manager, Robert Avard, was a very big help, and he helped us to apply to the Lotteries Commission to get funding from a community youth link project, it was called. It was to try to train young people to become ready for jobs, people who dropped out of school, and we decided to focus it on the local Indigenous population. So the whole program was involved Indigenous youth from Hamilton Hill and Yangebup and Cooperalup, and we had a Indigenous woman, Cheryl Osborne, who was the coordinator and ran the program, and the kids cleared all the rubbish away because the site had been an old farm, Murray Fortini's dairy farm, prior to it becoming the Wetlands Centre and the Scout Centre, and they cleared all the rubbish away, and with help from a pace they planted all the native vegetation around the centre, because it was just a cleared field with no vegetation, just a lot of weeds when we first arrived. And they built a bird hide down by the lake, and it turned out to be a very good program. You know, there were about 18, I think, local boys and girls, mostly in age from about 15 to 18, who got good work experience, and a lot of them went on to get jobs in land care after that. And when the program finished after about 18 months, we had the whole area landscaped and trails developed. The Woodland to Wetlands Trail was developed, and the amphitheatre was constructed, and the first bird hide was constructed, and hundreds of plants had been put in and watered and established, and the nursery was up and running, and we were ready to start working.
Incredible, in 18 months.
That's right, yeah.
That's miraculous.
We needed some staff to coordinate the volunteers. We had plenty of volunteers, but you know, volunteers come and go, and volunteers are not there all the time, and so we were looking to try to get some funding for a coordinator to coordinate the volunteers and to provide a service to the public, and to get various projects going and to apply for funding for. So we applied to lotteries and got funding for chairs and tables and poster boards and whiteboards and things like that. We asked the City of Cockburn, could they give us a grant for towards employing an officer. They, I think, gave us $4,000 a year. And we asked some of the local firms, and the Australian paper, who used to be active up in Spearwood, or it's now Bebre Lake Estate, they gave us $4,000 a year, and Alcoa gave us $4,000 a year, and the Water Corporation gave us $4,000, so we had $12,000, and that was enough in those days to employ a coordinator part-time, very part-time, but that was the way it all started. And Tony Poynton was the first coordinator. He stayed for about 18 months until he found a better paying job, which wouldn't have been hard, and moved on. And then Rex Salur took over, and he stayed for about a year until he found he needed a better job. And then Denise Crosby, who had recently finished her studies at Murdoch, she'd started, she was a member of the Wetlands Conservation Society going back to the 80s, so she knew what was going on. She said, I'd like to be involved. And I said, well, it's not much money. And she said, I don't mind. It's the sort of work I want to do. So she started out as a coordinator, and we gradually built it up. The Labor government lost the 96 election. The Liberal government came in, and they started a work for the dole program. And so we applied for funding under that, and we got some more funding to help with the salary, and some funding to employ a number of people who were unemployed, and getting job training. And so for quite a few years, I guess until about 2001, we had worked for the Dole people working there as sort of land care assistants full-time, and gradually the city of Cockburn increased its funding. Some of the other donors dropped away. We had a review of the centre was done in 2004 by a consultant for the city of Cockburn, and he said, you've got a very effective model here that's providing a good service to the community, but it's underfunded and could do more if it was better funded. And so the city of Cockburn came on board then with underwriting the coordinator's position, and we gradually built up by getting grants from other agencies and doing contract work to get an education officer and a land care assistant, both very part-time, and a nursery manager, very part-time. And that way, then eventually as the centre grew, we managed to get the city of Cockburn to agree to provide a administrative assistant, and so that was more or less the way it was when I left the position. I chaired the board for 27 years, and when I handed over to Tom Perigo in 2021, that was what the situation was.
Mm. And so when you say we did all this, who was we?
Well, it was, we had a board which consisted of 2 representatives from the Scouts, 2 representatives from the Wetlands Conservation Society, 2 representatives from the Friends group, and the coordinator, who was Denise for most of that time.
And who was the Friends group? Was that Friends of the Wetlands Centre?
Jim Connolly, who was an original board member, former primary school principal, he lived in the Lakeside retirement village at Bibra Lake. He became the founder of the Friends group, and they were operated mainly just to provide support, volunteer support for the centre. So there were a lot of people there who were willing to come out and help with land care activities and education activities, and also some of the administration.
People living in that village?
Some of them were in the village, some of them were local residents in neighbouring suburbs. Yeah.
And were you living in Murdoch then?
I was living in Cardinia.
Cardinia.
Yeah, and I moved to Murdoch later.
So when did you move to Cardinia?
In 1975.
Oh, yeah. So you were already there when all this...
Yes, that happened, yeah.
Because when you said about we needed someone to keep an eye on this, I was thinking, well, you lived right on the edge of that, didn't you?
Oh yes, and that's how I became involved in the Farrington Road dispute. But yes, it was. But once the centre was established and we had this valuable building and all these resources and gardens and bird hides and that to look after, we realised that in order to reach the full potential, we needed to have a full-time person there who could coordinate the volunteers and do the planning. We started organising wetlands conferences in 2005, and I think the one next year will be the 21st wetlands conference. We did that because with the 30th anniversary of the Ramsar Convention in 2001, we were approached by Jim Lane, who was a wetland manager in the department of what was then called CALM, and he said it'd be nice to do something to celebrate the Ramsar Convention and World Wetlands Day, which was the 2nd of February. That was the day on which the Ramsar Convention was signed in 1971. And so we said, oh, we'll do that. He said, all right, and he gave us, I think, a grant of $1,500 or something, and said, can you put on a seminar? So we put on a workshop for one day on the 2nd of February in 2001, and we were amazed at how many people were interested and turned up. We thought, oh, that's a good idea. And so after some discussion, we decided to do it on an annual basis, and we started then in 2005 doing that, and it's run every year since.
Very successful.
It has been a great networking event, and it was part of our mission to try to get people discussing ideas and appreciating wetlands and spreading the word to people that wetlands weren't just disease-infested swamps that need to be filled in and or drained, and because that had been the attitude more or less up to then, and that they were in fact havens of wildlife and extremely productive areas for wildlife.
So the we that did all this work, is that the Wetlands Conservation Society?
Well, the Wetlands Conservation Society was the driving force behind setting up the centre. That was, we wanted to have a centre where we could spread the word and educate people, provide activities for children and that sort of thing. And yes, there were people in the Wetlands Conservation Society. Norm Godfrey was one who did a lot of work. He became the voluntary nursery manager after his retirement, and Denise Crosby was another one who was very keen on it, and Harry de Jong, who was a sort of legendary naturalist from Kwinana. He was also one of the founding members. John Kitching was also very keen on it, and Rex Salua, and a number of those people have remained involved over the journey.
So how did you gather these people together to form the Wetlands Conservation Society?
Well, many of them were veterans of the Farrington Road campaign, and they were people who said, this isn't good enough. I mean, we were all deeply disappointed in the government and the way they just caved in to Main Roads when Main Roads wanted to force their agenda onto us. And they said, we've really got to find a better way if we don't want to just see all our wetlands disappearing. And we were aware of the fact that CALM had done a study and pointed out that 80% of the wetlands on the Swan Coastal Plain had been either drained, filled or destroyed in some way since European settlement, and that the remaining 20% weren't in good shape either. I think only 17% of the 20%, which means 3% overall, were in pristine condition. And so really, 97% of the wetlands had either been degraded or destroyed, and that we had to do something and we couldn't rely on government or the department to do anything, that it really had to come from the grassroots.
So it was basically a group of concerned citizens who got together to form the society. And
that's right, yeah.
Because I can imagine it was a lot of work doing all the grants and all the things you've talked about. That's a lot of work in your spare time.
Oh, yes.
We've all got jobs and families. So, I think...
yes, it's been an enormous effort, but, there have been a lot of people involved along the way, and I think what surprised me and delighted me was to see the response to when Main Roads tried it on again with Row 8, and I think Main Roads were shocked too. I mean, when they tried it on at Farrington Road, probably 100 people came out and confronted them, and the rest of the people scratched their heads and wondered what this was all about. When they tried it on with Row 8, there were thousands there, and everybody knew what it was about, and even the government was forced into saying, we won't allow this to go ahead, or the incoming government. And so, 30 years of effort did achieve something, I think, in terms of raising people's awareness and making people realise what they've got and what they stood to lose.
Yeah. And just, I know from my own involvement in Row 8, it was, before that event with the bulldozers coming, I think I was in it for about 8 years, advocating, educating and going to markets and just sharing all this knowledge that you guys had put together. And Felicity was another one, long term. And Joe Branco created a marvellous website which got out to people, and so people were prepared this time. We were shocked when it happened at Farrington Road because we just didn't expect it. With Row 8, everyone knew what was coming and what the options were, and that if we could stop the project or slow it down, the incoming government, if Labor won that election, would cancel the project altogether, and so there was much more to fight for. And do you think, a lot of this work that the Society and the Wetlands Centre have done over the years as far as land care as well, and educating children, educating the community, has added value to this place? Or?
Undoubtedly. I mean, there'd be many of those people, and I met quite a few of them during the Row 8 campaign, who had been to the Wetlands Centre as school kids on school visits, and had learnt about what goes on in the lakes and why the bush and the wetlands were valuable, and they didn't want to lose it. And I'm sure the educational effort had a big impact. The other thing I think that was really significant was in the System 6 report in 1980, the EPA had recommended the establishment of regional parks as a way of preserving the remnants of bushland that existed in the metropolitan area. And the Wetlands Conservation Society had picked this up as an issue and had advocated very strongly for regional parks, and we had managed to get the ear of one of the ministers, the planning minister at the time, David Smith, and he was keen on the idea too, and so we managed to get regional park planning underway through the planning department, and then eventually the Labor government set up two of the regional parks at Herdsman and Canning River before they lost office. But when the Liberals came in, Graham Kirath, who was the planning minister there, was very keen on regional parks, and he'd become the head of the Canning River Regional Park, and he then pushed the whole agenda, and they set up 8 regional parks in 1997, and then people started to see things happening. The Beeliar Regional Park, of which the Cockburn Wetlands Centre were situated, became quite a something that the city of Cockburn was very proud of, and although it extends also into Melville and Kwinana, and people started seeing signs going up and realising this was a regional park, and this was common land where they could recreate, and I think a sense of ownership developed then the Indigenous people also recognised that part of their heritage was being conserved, and it became, a realisation that here was something that was a precious community asset that needed to be protected, and I think there was a lot of that in it. Save Belia Wetlands was the name of a group that was fighting the Roe Highway development.
Mm. And did the Wetlands Conservation Society have much input into the development of this Belia Regional Park?
Oh, enormous, yeah. We were on all the planning committees, and I've chaired the Belia Regional Park Community Advisory Committee ever since it was established in 1997. We were also worked with the EPA and trying to get the policy articulated and get it to government. And the Conservation Council, we put it up. We were affiliated with the Conservation Council. We got the Conservation Council to adopt regional parks as one of their priority issues, and they put it forward to the minister, and we managed to get a sympathetic minister at the time to make it happen. And so, yes, I think we had a lot to do with making that happen, although it was the EPA's idea originally, and quite an innovative idea because no other Australian states had regional parks at that stage, and there weren't any models to go on, but they saw them as being a way of conserving wildlife, resources, conserving recreational areas, heritage, and landscape assets or landscape protection. And I think they've achieved that admirably. My greatest regret is that we haven't been able to get a government or a minister to expand the regional park system, because originally the EPA had recommended 14 regional parks. The Liberal government created 8 of them in 1997. The other 6 they had said they would declare once they had tried the model and seen how it worked. Well, that's 27 years ago, and the model's clearly worked, but there are pressures on now from developers and housing interests and that sort of thing, and it's made it hard to get them. The Liberal government did put out a plan for an Angara Regional Park, and it went to public comment and everything in 2001. It's never been completed. The same thing happened with the Peel Regional Park. The planning was all done. The draft was put out for public consultation, but it's never been completed. And there were plans for a Lower Serpentine Regional Park, a plan for Helena Valley Regional Park, plans have been put forward for Yulebrook Regional Park, but they haven't happened, and the current government's really not interested in them. But we'll keep on trying. That's persistence is the name of the game in conservation.
I think so. You're a great example of that.
We persisted for 30 years. I remember with Roe Highway that we held a forum on Roe Highway in 1985 at Coolbellup Primary School, and we invited the senior planner from Main Roads to come out, and we put all the reasons to him why they shouldn't do it, and he said, "Oh, don't worry about that, it won't happen in your lifetime, you should work on other issues." But we didn't take his advice, and
thankfully.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh my goodness. So, I think that's probably obvious, but just some of the achievements of the centre. What do you feel most proud of, or happy that...
Well, the centre, I think, has become a bit of a model for how to run these centres effectively. I mean, there are other models around. Some of them are run by local government, and the employees are local government employees, and they do a good job, but I think this centre has something special about it in that it's community run, and there are a lot of volunteers involved, and the policies are all made by the volunteers, and they have involved a much broader section of the community, I think, than the ones that are run by government departments. And I think that the centre has been very effective in raising awareness about the value of wetlands, about the fact that we live in a biodiversity hotspot, and that we have this incredible heritage of plants and animals that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. I mean, just as an aside, I was amazed when I went to live in the United States and then in the eastern states that the biodiversity is nothing like what we have here, yet people who, like me, who lived here for most of their life, didn't really appreciate that. They just thought everywhere was like that. They didn't realise that, this is one of the unique areas in the world where we have enormous biodiversity, and that it's a lot of the things here are absolutely unique, and they are, unfortunately, some of the biodiversity hotspots are in areas like the Perth metropolitan area, which is undergoing enormous urban development. And so we had to raise people's awareness about those things, and I think it's now much more widely understood, and people are saying with areas like Brixton Street and Anstey Keene, this is precious, there's nothing else like it, we have to preserve it. And so David James, who's been a member of the Wetlands Conservation Society for over 30 years, he and his partner Bryony Fremlin have done an enormously valuable job in protecting the Anstey Keene dampland, which is probably, after Brixton Street, the second most biodiverse area in the metropolitan area. From what its fate was going to be was an industrial estate for Landcorp. And I mean, these are all the things that flowed on from the work that's happened through the centre, and it's empowered people to go out and do things. There have been many people who've gone on to work in environmental areas that have spent some time working either as volunteers at the centre or came there as students on excursions. So I think the land care, the education, the youth work have all been very valuable, and I think that we have had some impact on raising awareness and making governments more aware, but it's tough. You're up against quite powerful vested interests who stand to make a lot of money by destroying the environment.
And that's the other thing I was going to ask you is, your longevity throughout this whole time of protecting wetlands. Have there been any low points for you in this journey?
I think when I saw the bulldozers rolling for row 8 and I saw them cutting down the century-old Norfolk Island pine trees, that was probably the lowest point I've been. I never lost hope, but I thought, they're doing an incredible amount of destruction here. Just was environmental vandalism being authorised by the state government, basically, and it was... but it just made me more determined to keep on going. I think the important thing that keeps me going through all of this is that I realise that you're going to lose more of the campaigns than you win, but if we weren't out there doing things, you'd lose all of them. So that the few that we have won, and things like regional parks and the wetlands conservation policy and the some of the establishment of the Wetlands Centre, things like that. If we hadn't gone there and kept on persisting, they wouldn't have happened, and we would have just gone on destroying things. So, I'd like to have won a lot more. We've lost a lot. There are still a lot of unfinished business that needs to be completed, and hopefully people will go on doing that. It's a tough time at present with the focus far more on economics and the environment, but you never know. With some of these things like the establishment of the centre, we didn't think we had a chance, and we were knocked back the first time, and then it came through. And with row 8, it looked like we were going to lose, and then the government changed, and it looks like things might be safe now, although you never can feel completely safe. And so yes, I think it's persistence. And I've seen a lot of people come into the conservation movement, and they've worked really hard and burned themselves out, and then felt it was all a waste of time because what they were working for, it didn't succeed. And I think the mistake is to think that you're going to win every campaign or everything, or that logic and reason or good sense or science will prevail. It's much more complicated than that, and you're dealing with politics, which isn't really very rational. You're dealing with people who are pushing their own position for monetary gain, and you're up against well-resourced companies who stand to make a lot of money out of development. So you can't expect to win everyone, but you can expect, perhaps if you persist, that eventually your message might get through.
And, in your case, I think you've got a lot to be proud of with this area. There's such an important area to so many people now. And as you said, if you hadn't done it, it probably wouldn't be here.
Yes, well, it's not just me, but there's been a lot of people involved. When I first came to Murdoch University in 1975, former Deputy Premier Don Taylor, who was a member for Cockburn, came to see me and said, I know you're interested in the environment. He said, there are all those lakes down there. He said, they'll all be filled in and developed unless something is done about it. He said, I think I can get some funding for a study to identify ones which are valuable. And Peter Newman was also involved in that conversation. And Peter said, well, he was a foundation lecturer in environmental science at Murdoch. He said, well, I can get a team of students together and we can do that over the summer. So they got an Australian Heritage Grant, and they did what was called the Cockburn Wetlands Study, and that looked at all the chain of lakes going down from North Lake down to the Spectacles in Kwinana, and identified what the values of them were and what their conservation needs were, and that became part of the EPA's System 6 study and the recommendations of the Beeliar Regional Park. So, there's been a lot of people over the years who've contributed to it, and I firmly believe that change comes from the grassroots, not from the top. But you can only make that change when people have the facts and they're informed. So you need to do the science, and you need to understand what the values are and which species are endangered and which species are unique and which species are in need of special protection and what ecosystems are threatened and endangered. You need to then make people aware of this, and then the grassroots movement can start putting pressure on the politicians. But I mean, they're only there for 4 years, and they're thinking about the next election, not about the next 50 years. So they need continual pressure. But once in a while, you find they're in a situation where, like in 1993 with the federal government, they had an election that it looked like they were going to lose. They were looking for things, and so the environment for them is a second order issue. It's not a first order issue. Bread and butter issues are first order issues, but they thought, well, we might be able to pick up a few more votes from people who care about the environment. There are not many of them, they probably thought, but that might be enough, and it was enough. But that's when the things happen, is when they feel that they can pick up some of these things which they're aware of, but they won't be addressing as a matter of priority, because they're much more concerned about cost of living and unemployment and things like that, which most people's primary interests.
Yeah. Well, I better let you go because we've been here an hour. But I just wanted to finally ask, like, all this work you've done, pretty much most of your life dedicated in your spare time to this, is it a feeling that drives you, or is it a mixture of feeling and science and knowledge? How do you see that?
I think it's a sense of social responsibility, that I feel that I've been pretty fortunate in my life, having good health and being in a career that I enjoyed, and having the opportunity, one of the fortunate ones that had a free university education before they brought in HECS and things like that I owe society something, and to use what skills I have in areas where I can. So I've done that in environmental areas and in energy areas where I feel I have some knowledge that's relevant, and I think it's just a question of giving back to society in return for what they have given me. And also there's a passion about it. I mean, I know that being out in the bushland with the wildflowers and birds, that's an experience I've enjoyed since childhood, and I'd like to think that future generations can go on enjoying that the way I have.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me today.
You're welcome.